The morning sun cast long shadows across Maple Street as Gloria Martinez adjusted her rearview mirror and checked her watch. 6:45 a.m., right on schedule. She had been driving the same school bus route through the suburban neighborhoods of Cedar Falls for 17 years, and in all that time, she had never missed a pickup or failed to notice when something was amiss. Her passengers often teased her about having eyes in the back of her head, but Gloria knew it was something deeper than keen observation. It was instinct, honed by years of caring for other people's children as if they were her own. This particular Tuesday started like any other. The familiar rumble of the diesel engine beneath her feet, the squeak of the brakes as she approached each stop, the cheerful chatter of children climbing aboard with backpacks bouncing against their shoulders. Gloria knew every child by name, every parent who waved from their doorway, every house where she needed to wait an extra moment for a sleepy kindergartner to stumble down the front steps. But as she turned onto Oakwood Avenue, something felt different. Not wrong, exactly, but different enough to make her grip the steering wheel a little tighter. 8-year-old Emma Caldwell usually waited at the corner of Oakwood and 3rd Street with her older brother Jake, both of them bundling together against the morning chill. Emma was a quiet child with serious brown eyes and pigtails that never seemed to stay perfectly straight, no matter how carefully her mother braided them each morning. She always carried a worn, stuffed elephant named Peanuts in her backpack, though she tried to hide it from the older kids. Jake, at 11, was her protector and constant companion, always making sure she got on the bus first and found a good seat. They were inseparable, those two, which was why Gloria's chest tightened when she saw Emma standing alone at the bus stop, her small figure hunched against the October wind. Before we dive deeper into this story, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll always stay updated with our upcoming videos and continue discovering more fascinating stories. Now let's begin. Gloria pulled the bus to a gentle stop and opened the door with its familiar pneumatic hiss. Emma climbed the steps slowly, her usual smile replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Her clothes were wrinkled, as if she had slept in them, and there were dark circles under her eyes that shouldn't have been there on the face of a child. Most telling of all, Peanuts was clutched openly in her arms instead of hidden away in her backpack. "Morning, sweetheart," Gloria said, her voice warm but carefully casual. "Where's your brother today?" Emma's grip on the stuffed elephant tightened. "He's sick," she whispered, not meeting Gloria's eyes. "Mommy said he has to stay home." Gloria nodded, but something cold settled in her stomach. In 17 years of driving this route, Jake Caldwell had never missed a day of school for illness. The boy had perfect attendance records and took pride in never getting sick. Moreover, there was something about the way Emma delivered the message that set off every alarm bell Gloria possessed. The words came out too rehearsed, too careful, as if they had been practiced. As Emma made her way down the aisle, Gloria caught a glimpse of her left wrist. There, just visible beneath the sleeve of her sweater, was what looked like a bruise. Dark purple and finger-shaped, it wrapped around her thin wrist like a terrible bracelet. Gloria's hands trembled slightly as she closed the bus door and pulled away from the curb. She had seen bruises like that before, and they never appeared by accident. The rest of the route passed in a blur of routine stops and familiar faces, but Gloria's mind was entirely focused on the small girl sitting 3 rows back, staring out the window, with an expression far too old for her years. Every few minutes, Gloria glanced in her rearview mirror, noting how Emma kept touching her wrist, how she flinched when other children laughed too loudly, how she seemed to shrink into herself with each passing mile. By the time they reached Jefferson Elementary School, Gloria had made a decision that would change everything. She watched Emma file off the bus with the other children, noting how the little girl walked with her head down, shoulders hunched, as if she were trying to become invisible. As the last student disappeared through the school's front doors, Gloria remained parked in the circle drive, her engine idling while she wrestled with what she had witnessed. 17 years of experience had taught her to trust her instincts, and every instinct she possessed was screaming that Emma Caldwell was in danger. Gloria sat in the empty school bus for nearly 10 minutes after the last child had entered Jefferson Elementary, her weathered hands gripping the steering wheel as she stared at the brick facade of the building. The morning was growing warmer, and she could hear the distant sounds of children settling into their classrooms, but her mind was consumed by the image of that bruise on Emma's wrist. In her 17 years as a school bus driver, she had learned to read the subtle signs that adults often missed. Children carried their secrets in the slope of their shoulders, in the way they avoided eye contact, in the careful way they crafted lies to protect the very people who were supposed to protect them. She thought about Emma's brother Jake, supposedly homesick for the first time in his academic career. The boy was as healthy as a young horse and took pride in his perfect attendance record. Just last month he had boasted to Gloria about never missing a day of school, even when he had a fever. It wasn't like him to suddenly develop an illness serious enough to keep him home. And if Jake really was sick, why hadn't their mother called the school to excuse his absence? Why hadn't she mentioned it when she waved goodbye from the front door, as she did every morning? The more Gloria thought about it, the more convinced she became that something was terribly wrong in the Caldwell household. She had been driving school buses long enough to recognize the signs of abuse, though she prayed she was wrong this time. The rehearsed explanation, the visible bruising, the way Emma had clung to her stuffed elephant like a lifeline, it all painted a picture that made Gloria's heart ache. Making a decision that went against every protocol in her employee handbook, Gloria pulled out her personal cell phone and dialed the school's main office. She had worked with Jefferson Elementary long enough to have built relationships with the staff, particularly with Mrs. Henderson, the school secretary who had been there almost as long as Gloria had been driving. Jefferson Elementary. This is Sarah Henderson speaking. Sarah, it's Gloria Martinez from Bus 47. I need to speak with someone about one of my students, Emma Caldwell. Something's not right. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sarah Henderson had worked in schools for over 20 years and knew the gravity in Gloria's voice meant serious trouble. What do you mean, Gloria? Is Emma hurt? Gloria took a deep breath, knowing that once she spoke these words aloud, there would be no taking them back. I think she might be being abused at home. She had bruises on her wrist this morning, and her brother Jake is supposedly sick, but I don't buy it. Something happened in that house last night, Sarah. I can feel it. The line went quiet for several seconds. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was carefully controlled. Gloria, I need you to come into the building right now. Park your bus and come straight to my office. Don't discuss this with anyone else until we can get the proper people involved. Gloria's heart was pounding as she maneuvered the large vehicle into a parking space and made her way through the familiar hallways of Jefferson Elementary. The walls were decorated with colorful artwork and motivational posters, a stark contrast to the dark thoughts that consumed her mind. She passed Mrs. Peterson's third-grade classroom and caught a glimpse of Emma through the door's window. The little girl was sitting at her desk, but instead of participating in the morning lesson, she was staring down at her hands, absently rubbing her bruised wrist. Sarah Henderson was waiting in her office with Principal Williams, a kind man in his 50s who had earned the respect of both students and staff during his tenure at the school. His expression was grave as Gloria entered and closed the door behind her. Gloria, tell us exactly what you observed this morning, Principal Williams said, gesturing for her to take a seat. Don't leave out any details, no matter how small they might seem. For the next 20 minutes, Gloria recounted everything she had noticed about Emma's appearance and behavior. She described the bruises, the way the child had delivered her rehearsed explanation about Jake being sick, the fear in her eyes, and how she had openly carried her comfort object instead of hiding it as usual. As she spoke, she watched both administrators' expressions grow increasingly concerned. "Has Emma displayed any behavioral changes in recent weeks?" Principal Williams asked. "Has her academic performance declined, or have her teachers noticed anything unusual?" Sarah consulted her computer screen, pulling up Emma's file. Mrs. Peterson did mention that Emma has been more withdrawn lately. Her grades haven't dropped significantly, but she's been asking to go to the nurse's office more frequently, complaining of stomach aches. And yesterday she fell asleep during math class, which isn't like her at all. Gloria felt her stomach clench. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture that no child should ever have to live. "What about Jake? Has anyone checked on why he's absent today?" Principal Williams reached for his phone. "I'm calling Child Protective Services right now." "If your instincts are correct, Gloria, we need to act quickly. Sometimes the difference between life and death is measured in hours, not days." As he dialed the number, Gloria closed her eyes and said a silent prayer that she was wrong, that there was an innocent explanation for everything she had witnessed. But in her heart, she knew better. Her instincts had never failed her before, and they weren't failing her now. Somewhere in the Caldwell house, a little boy might be in desperate need of help, and his sister was carrying the weight of secrets no 8-year-old should ever have to bear. Within an hour of Gloria's call to the school office, the machinery of child protection was in motion. Detective Sarah Chen from the Cedar Falls Police Department sat across from Gloria in Principal Williams' office, her notebook filled with carefully documented observations and timeline details. Detective Chen was a specialist in child abuse cases, a woman whose gentle demeanor masked a fierce determination to protect the most vulnerable members of society. "Mrs. Martinez, your attention to detail is remarkable," Detective Chen said, reviewing her notes. "The specific location and appearance of the bruising you described, combined with the behavioral changes and the suspicious absence of the brother, gives us enough probable cause to conduct a welfare check at the Caldwell residence." Gloria shifted in her chair, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. "Detective Chen, I've been driving school buses for 17 years, and I've learned to trust my gut. Every instinct I have is telling me that those children are in immediate danger. Emma was terrified this morning, and the way she kept touching that bruise on her wrist. It breaks my heart." Principal Williams leaned forward in his chair. "What's our next step?" "Emma is currently in Mrs. Peterson's classroom, but she's been increasingly distressed as the morning has progressed. The school nurse checked on her twice already." Detective Chen closed her notebook and stood up. "I'm going to the Caldwell house right now to check on Jake. If he's truly sick, then we'll apologize for the intrusion and document that we followed up on a concerned report. But if what Mrs. Martinez suspects is correct," she paused, her expression growing somber, "well, then we might be saving 2 lives today." As Detective Chen prepared to leave, Gloria felt compelled to share one more crucial detail. "Detective, there's something else. Emma's mother, Patricia Caldwell, she's always been friendly when I pick up the kids, waves from the door, sometimes comes out to chat about the weather or ask about school events, but this morning she didn't appear at all. The blinds were drawn and the house felt empty, like nobody wanted to be seen." This information seemed to galvanize Detective Chen further. She made another note, and then looked directly at Gloria. "Mrs. Martinez, I want you to know that your decision to speak up today took tremendous courage. Too often, adults see signs of abuse and convince themselves they're imagining things, or they assume someone else will handle it. Your willingness to trust your instincts and take action could be the difference between life and death for these children." After Detective Chen left for the Caldwell house, Gloria found herself unable to concentrate on her usual duties. She completed her morning route in a haze of anxiety and concern, mechanically picking up the high school students for their later start time, while her mind remained focused on Emma and Jake. Every few minutes she found herself checking her phone, hoping for an update from the detective or the school. Back at Jefferson Elementary, Mrs. Peterson was growing increasingly worried about Emma's condition. The little girl had barely spoken all morning and had twice asked to go to the bathroom, only to return with red-rimmed eyes that suggested she had been crying. During reading time, Emma had laid her head on her desk and closed her eyes, clutching peanuts so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Emma, sweetie, are you feeling okay?" Mrs. Peterson knelt beside the child's desk, her voice gentle and concerned. "Would you like to visit Mrs. Johnson in the nurse's office?" Emma looked up at her teacher, with eyes that seemed far too old for her 8-year-old face. For a moment, it looked like she might say something important, might finally release the burden of whatever secret she was carrying, but then she simply nodded and whispered, "My tummy hurts." As Mrs. Peterson walked Emma to the nurse's office, she couldn't shake the feeling that the child was carrying a weight that no elementary school student should ever have to bear. In her 15 years of teaching, she had learned to recognize the signs of children in crisis, and Emma Caldwell was displaying every red flag in the book. Meanwhile, Detective Chen was pulling into the driveway of the Caldwell house, a modest 2-story home in a quiet residential neighborhood. The lawn was well maintained, and the exterior showed no obvious signs of distress or neglect. But as she approached the front door, she noticed what Gloria had observed earlier. All the blinds and curtains were drawn tight, giving the house a closed-off, secretive appearance that seemed at odds with the open, friendly neighborhood surrounding it. She knocked on the front door with the firm, authoritative rap that identified her as law enforcement. "Cedar Falls Police Department." "I'm here to conduct a welfare check." The silence that followed stretched on for nearly a minute before she heard footsteps approaching the door. When it finally opened, Patricia Caldwell appeared in the gap, but she only opened the door a few inches and kept the security chain engaged. Her appearance was disheveled, her hair uncombed and her clothes wrinkled as if she had slept in them. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm Detective Chen with the Cedar Falls Police Department. We received a report that your son Jake was absent from school today due to illness, and we wanted to check on his welfare. May I come in and speak with him?" Patricia's eyes darted nervously behind Detective Chen, as if she were looking for an escape route. "Jake's sleeping. He has a bad fever and I don't want to wake him up. Maybe you could come back later." But Detective Chen had been doing this job long enough to recognize the signs of deception. Patricia's nervous energy, her reluctance to open the door fully, and the way she avoided making direct eye contact all suggested that she was hiding something significant. More importantly, Detective Chen could see past Patricia into the living room, where furniture appeared to have been hastily rearranged, and there were what looked like dark stains on the carpet that someone had attempted to clean. "Mrs. Caldwell, I understand your concern about waking a sick child, but I need to verify his welfare for our report. It will only take a minute, and then I'll be out of your way." Detective Chen's trained eyes took in every detail as Patricia Caldwell reluctantly unlatched the security chain and opened the front door. The living room beyond revealed a scene that immediately confirmed her worst suspicions. Furniture had been moved from its usual positions, leaving indentations in the carpet that suggested hasty rearrangement. A coffee table sat at an odd angle, and she could see dark spots on the beige carpet that appeared to be bloodstains someone had attempted to clean with household products. "Mrs. Caldwell, I need you to call Jake down here right now," Detective Chen said, her voice firm but not aggressive. She had learned that maintaining a calm demeanor often prevented suspects from becoming defensive or violent. I can wait while you get him. Patricia's hands were shaking visibly now, and she kept glancing toward the staircase as if she were afraid of what might come down it. Like I said, he's really sick. He's been throwing up all night and has a high fever. I don't think he should be disturbed. But Detective Chen was already moving past Patricia into the living room, her hand resting casually on her radio in case she needed to call for backup. The metallic smell of cleaned blood hung faintly in the air, mixed with the harsh chemical scent of bleach. On the mantelpiece, she noticed that several family photos had been turned face down, and a small lamp lay on its side behind the couch, its shade dented and torn. Mrs. Caldwell, I'm going to ask you one more time to call your son downstairs. If you refuse, I'll have no choice but to search the house myself, under the authority of a welfare check. The sound that came from upstairs at that moment made Patricia's face go completely white and caused Detective Chen's heart to race. It was a child's voice, weak and frightened, calling out a single word: "Help." Detective Chen didn't wait for permission. She took the stairs 2 at a time, following the sound of the voice to a closed door at the end of the hallway. When she tried the handle, she found it locked from the outside. "Jake? Jake, this is Detective Chen with the police. Can you hear me?" "Yes," came the weak reply. "Please. I can't move my arm right." The detective's blood ran cold. She turned to Patricia, who had followed her upstairs and was now standing in the hallway, looking like a woman whose world was collapsing around her. "Open this door immediately, or I will break it down." With trembling hands, Patricia produced a key from her pocket and unlocked the bedroom door. What Detective Chen found inside would haunt her for years to come. 11-year-old Jake Caldwell was lying on his bed, his left arm clearly broken and twisted at an unnatural angle. His face was swollen and bruised, and there were defensive wounds on his hands and forearms where he had tried to protect himself. Most disturbingly, he had been locked in the room for what appeared to be several hours, with no access to food, water, or medical attention. "Oh, sweetheart," Detective Chen breathed, immediately calling for an ambulance on her radio. "You're going to be okay now. I'm here to help you." Jake's eyes filled with tears of relief. "He said he would kill Emma if I told anyone. He said nobody would believe us because he's our stepfather, and the police always believe adults over kids." Detective Chen knelt beside the bed, carefully avoiding jostling Jake's injured arm. "Who did this to you, Jake? Was it your stepfather?" The boy nodded weakly. "Mike. He came home drunk last night and started yelling at Mom about money. When I tried to get Emma to go upstairs, he grabbed me and threw me against the wall. Then he kept hitting me. Emma tried to help, and he grabbed her wrist so hard I thought he was going to break it too." As Jake spoke, Detective Chen was already calling for additional units and child protective services. "Where is Mike now, Jake? Is he still in the house?" "He left early this morning before Emma had to go to school. He told Mom to keep me locked in here and to make sure Emma didn't say anything to anyone. He said if anyone found out, he would come back and finish what he started." The sound of sirens approaching the house indicated that help was arriving, but Detective Chen knew that the immediate physical rescue was only the beginning. These children had been living in a nightmare, and it would take time and careful intervention to help them heal from both the physical and emotional trauma they had endured. Patricia Caldwell had collapsed into a chair in the hallway, sobbing into her hands. "I didn't know what to do," she kept repeating. "He said he would kill all of us if I called the police. He said nobody would believe me, that everyone would think I was making it up." Detective Chen felt a familiar surge of anger toward the perpetrator, but she also understood the complex dynamics of domestic abuse that had trapped Patricia in an impossible situation. Fear was a powerful weapon, that abusers use to maintain control over their victims, and Patricia had been as much a victim as her children, though her primary responsibility had been to protect them. As the paramedics rushed upstairs to attend to Jake's injuries, Detective Chen called Jefferson Elementary to speak with Principal Williams. "We found Jake," she reported. "He's been severely beaten and has a broken arm. He's being transported to Cedar Falls General Hospital right now. I need you to have someone bring Emma to the hospital immediately, and I need Child Protective Services to meet us there. These children are not going back to this house tonight." She paused, thinking about the school bus driver whose instincts had set this rescue in motion. "And please tell Mrs. Martinez that her gut feelings were absolutely correct. She may have saved these children's lives today." The pediatric emergency room at Cedar Falls General Hospital became a nexus of controlled urgency as multiple agencies coordinated to ensure the safety and well-being of the Caldwell children. Jake was immediately taken into a treatment room where Dr. Rebecca Santos, a pediatric emergency physician with extensive experience in child abuse cases, began a thorough examination of his injuries. The 11-year-old's left arm was indeed broken in 2 places, and X-rays revealed that this was not his first encounter with violence. There were partially healed fractures in his ribs that were consistent with previous abuse. "Jake, I need you to tell me about these older injuries," Dr. Santos said gently, as nurses prepared to set his arm. "When did you hurt your ribs?" The boy's eyes filled with tears, but his voice was steady as he answered, "About a month ago. Mike got mad because I got a B on my math test instead of an A. He punched me in the stomach and then kicked me when I fell down. But Emma helped me, and we told everyone at school that I fell off my bike." Dr. Santos felt her jaw tighten with controlled anger, but she kept her voice calm and reassuring. "You and Emma have been very brave, Jake. You've been trying to protect each other, haven't you?" He nodded, wincing as the medical team positioned his arm for casting. "Emma's little, and she gets scared easily. I always told her that as long as we stuck together and didn't tell anyone, Mike wouldn't hurt her as bad. But last night—" His voice broke, and he began to cry in earnest. "Last night he grabbed her wrist so hard, and she was screaming, and I couldn't stop him because he had already broken my arm." Meanwhile, Principal Williams and Mrs. Peterson had arrived at the hospital with Emma, who had been told only that her brother was sick and needed to go to the doctor. The 8-year-old clutched Peanuts tightly as they walked through the hospital corridors, her eyes wide with the kind of fear that comes from experience with unpredictable adults and dangerous situations. Detective Chen met them at the elevator, kneeling down to Emma's eye level in the way that experienced professionals do when they need to communicate with traumatized children. "Hi, Emma. My name is Detective Chen. I'm here to help make sure you and Jake are safe. Your brother is upstairs getting his arm fixed by some very nice doctors." Emma's lower lip began to tremble. "Is Jake going to be okay? Mike said that if we told anyone about last night, he would come back and hurt us worse." The detective's heart ached for this brave little girl who had been carrying such a terrible burden. "Emma, Mike is not going to hurt you anymore. We're going to make sure of that. And yes, Jake is going to be just fine. The doctors are taking very good care of him." As they rode the elevator to the pediatric ward, Detective Chen explained to Principal Williams and Mrs. Peterson that both children would need to be placed in protective custody while Child Protective Services conducted a full investigation. Patricia Caldwell was being interviewed by social workers to determine her level of complicity in the abuse and her ability to protect her children moving forward. The stepfather, Mike Richardson, has a history of domestic violence from previous relationships, Detective Chen explained quietly. "We've issued an arrest warrant, and we're actively searching for him. He's considered dangerous, so the children will need to be in a secure placement until he's in custody." When they reached Jake's room, Emma ran to his bedside despite her fear, her small hand carefully touching his uninjured arm. "Jake, are you okay? I was so scared when they took you to the hospital." Jake managed a weak smile for his sister. "I'm okay, Em. The doctors gave me some medicine so my arm doesn't hurt as much. And guess what? Detective Chen says we don't have to go back to the house. We don't have to see Mike anymore." The relief in Emma's eyes was profound, but it was mixed with a confusion that was heartbreaking to witness. For children who have lived with abuse, safety can feel foreign and uncertain. They had spent so long in survival mode that the concept of genuine protection was difficult to accept. "Doctor." Santos emerged from her consultation with the other medical staff and approached Detective Chen. "Jake's arm will heal completely, but he's going to need physical therapy. More concerning are the psychological trauma indicators we're seeing in both children. They're going to need extensive counseling to help them process what they've experienced." As if to underscore the doctor's assessment, Emma suddenly looked around the room with panic in her eyes. "Where's Mommy? Is Mommy okay? Mike gets really mad when we're not home when he gets back." Detective Chen knelt down beside Emma's chair. "Your Mommy is safe, sweetheart. She's talking to some people who are going to help her too, and Mike is not allowed to come near any of you anymore. There are laws that protect children, and we're going to use those laws to keep you safe." But even as she spoke these reassuring words, Detective Chen knew that the road ahead for the Caldwell family would be long and difficult. The physical injuries would heal, but the emotional scars from months or possibly years of abuse would take much longer to address. The children would need stable, nurturing care while they learned to trust adults again and rebuilt their sense of security in the world. As evening approached, social worker Maria Gonzalez arrived to discuss placement options for Jake and Emma. She was a veteran of the child welfare system who had seen too many cases like this one, but she never became callous to the suffering of the children she served. "We have an excellent foster family that specializes in caring for siblings who have experienced trauma," she told Detective Chen and the medical team. "The Hendersons have been working with our agency for over 10 years, and they understand how to help children who have been through situations like this." Jake overheard this conversation and immediately became agitated. "We have to stay together," he said urgently. "Emma and I have to stay together. I promised her I would always take care of her." Maria smiled reassuringly. "Of course you'll stay together, Jake. We never separate siblings unless there's absolutely no other choice." The Henderson family specifically asked to care for both of you. As the day's events began to wind down and preparations were made for the children's placement in foster care, Detective Chen took a moment to call Gloria Martinez. The school bus driver had been waiting anxiously for news, and she deserved to know that her instincts and courage had indeed saved 2 young lives. 3 days after Jake and Emma Caldwell had been placed in emergency foster care with the Henderson family, Gloria Martinez found herself sitting in the comfortable living room of their temporary new home. She had asked Detective Chen if she could visit the children, needing to see for herself that they were truly safe and beginning to heal. The Hendersons, David and Linda, were experienced foster parents who had dedicated their retirement years to caring for children in crisis, and their warm, welcoming home felt like a sanctuary after the chaos and fear the Caldwell children had endured. Jake's arm was in a bright blue cast that Emma had decorated with drawings of elephants, rainbows, and stick figures that represented their new foster family. The swelling in his face had gone down considerably, revealing the handsome features that had been obscured by bruising. More importantly, there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there when Gloria had last seen him boarding her school bus just a week earlier. "Mrs. Martinez," Emma exclaimed when she saw her bus driver walk through the front door. She ran to Gloria and wrapped her small arms around the woman's waist, hugging her with an intensity that spoke to the gratitude she couldn't yet put into words. Jake told me you're the one who saved us. You knew something was wrong, even when I tried to pretend everything was okay." Gloria knelt down to Emma's level, fighting back tears as she saw how much calmer and more relaxed the little girl appeared. The dark circles under her eyes were fading, and she was wearing a bright yellow dress that Linda Henderson had bought for her, along with new shoes that actually fit properly. Most significantly, she wasn't clutching peanuts with the desperate grip of a child in crisis, though the stuffed elephant was still never far from her side. "Sweetheart, you and Jake saved yourselves by being so brave," Gloria replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I just happened to notice that you needed some help, and I'm so glad I listened to what my heart was telling me." David Henderson, a retired teacher with gentle eyes and graying hair, joined them in the living room. "Mrs. Martinez, I can't tell you how grateful Linda and I are for what you did. In our 15 years as foster parents, we've seen too many cases where adults missed the signs or chose not to get involved. Your willingness to trust your instincts and take action literally saved these children's lives." Jake, who had been quietly coloring at the kitchen table, approached the group with a drawing he had made. It showed a yellow school bus with a smiling figure behind the wheel and two children standing safely beside it under a bright sun. "I made this for you, Mrs. Martinez. It's you saving me and Emma." As Gloria studied the drawing, she noticed that Jake had drawn himself and Emma holding hands, and there were other figures in the background that appeared to represent the Hendersons, Detective Chen, and the doctors and nurses who had helped them. It was a child's way of documenting his rescue and expressing gratitude for the network of caring adults who had surrounded them in their time of greatest need. "Jake, this is beautiful," Gloria said, carefully accepting the drawing. "Would it be okay if I hung this up on my refrigerator at home? It would make me smile every time I see it." The boy beamed with pride, and Gloria was struck by how different he looked when he wasn't carrying the weight of protecting his sister from an abusive adult. He was able to be 11 years old again, to focus on things like artwork and recovery instead of survival and fear. Linda Henderson brought out glasses of apple juice and homemade cookies, creating the kind of normal, nurturing environment that both children desperately needed. As they sat around the coffee table sharing snacks, Detective Chen arrived with an update on the case that had brought them all together. "I wanted you all to hear this news directly from me," she announced, her expression serious but hopeful. "We arrested Mike Richardson early this morning at a motel about 50 miles from here. He's been charged with multiple counts of child abuse, domestic violence, and unlawful imprisonment. With the evidence we've gathered and the children's testimony, the district attorney is confident we can ensure he spends significant time in prison." Jake and Emma exchanged a look that spoke to the mixture of relief and lingering fear that was natural for children who had lived under the threat of violence for so long. "Does that mean he can never hurt us again?" Emma asked quietly. Detective Chen knelt down beside the little girl. "Emma, there are going to be legal proceedings, which means you and Jake might need to talk to some lawyers and maybe a judge about what happened. But Mike Richardson is going to be held accountable for what he did to you, and there are going to be legal protections in place to make sure he can never be near you again." The conversation turned to more immediate concerns about the children's adjustment to their new living situation. Both Jake and Emma would be returning to Jefferson Elementary School the following Monday, where counselors would be available to help them readjust to their academic routine while processing their trauma. Mrs. Peterson had already begun modifying their classroom environment to ensure they felt safe and supported. "The most important thing now is letting these children be children," Linda Henderson said, watching as Emma showed Gloria the new books she had been reading. "They've spent so much time in survival mode that they need to relearn how to play, how to trust, and how to believe that the adults in their lives will protect them instead of hurting them." As the afternoon progressed, Gloria found herself marveling at the resilience of the human spirit, particularly as manifested in children who had endured unthinkable trauma, yet still possessed the capacity for joy, trust, and hope. Emma laughed as she played a card game with Linda, and Jake excitedly showed off a model airplane he was building with David's help. These were normal childhood activities that had been impossible in their previous environment. Before leaving, Gloria sat with both children on the Hendersons' front porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I want you both to know something very important," she said, her arm around Emma, while Jake leaned against her other side. "What happened to you was not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong and you didn't deserve to be hurt. Some adults make very bad choices, but that doesn't reflect on you at all." Jake nodded solemnly. Detective Chen told us that too. She said that kids are never responsible when adults hurt them. Emma looked up at Gloria with eyes that seemed older than her 8 years, but were beginning to show glimpses of the carefree child she should have been all along. "Mrs. Martinez, will you still be our bus driver when we go back to school?" Gloria smiled, hugging both children closer. "Absolutely, sweetheart. I'll be there every morning at 7:15, just like always. And you know what? Now when I see you at the bus stop, I won't have to worry about whether you're safe at home. I'll know that you're being taken care of by people who love you." 6 months later, the crisp April morning air carried the promise of spring as Gloria Martinez pulled her familiar yellow school bus up to the corner of Oakwood and 3rd Street. The scene that greeted her was one that never failed to warm her heart. Jake and Emma Caldwell stood together at the bus stop, but everything about their demeanor had transformed since that terrible October morning when Gloria's instincts had first told her something was desperately wrong. Emma bounced on her toes with excitement, her backpack decorated with new patches that Linda Henderson had helped her sew on during their weekend craft sessions. Her hair was neatly braided, and she wore a bright purple jacket that actually fit her properly. Most remarkably, she carried herself with the confidence of a child who knew she was loved and protected. Peanuts was still tucked safely in her backpack, but no longer as a desperate comfort object. Now he was simply a cherished friend along for the adventure of each school day. Jake stood beside his sister, with his arm completely healed and stronger than ever. The cast had come off 2 months earlier, and he had thrown himself into physical therapy with the determination that characterized everything he did. More importantly, the haunted look that had shadowed his eyes for so long had been replaced by the natural enthusiasm of a 12-year-old boy who was discovering what it meant to feel safe in his own life. "Good morning, you two," Gloria called out as she opened the bus door with its familiar pneumatic hiss. "How are my favorite passengers doing today?" "Mrs. Martinez, guess what?" Emma practically bubbled with excitement as she climbed the steps. "Linda and David are taking us to the state fair this weekend, and Jake's going to enter his model airplane in the building contest." Jake followed his sister onto the bus, his own smile bright and genuine. "And Emma's been practicing her reading every night because she wants to read a story to the little kids at the library during volunteer day." As the children made their way to their usual seats, 3rd row back on the right, where they could sit together and Jake could still keep a protective eye on his sister, Gloria felt the familiar surge of gratitude that had become part of her daily routine. The legal proceedings against Mike Richardson had concluded the previous month with his conviction on multiple charges of child abuse and domestic violence. He had been sentenced to 15 years in prison, with a permanent restraining order that would prevent him from ever contacting the children again. Patricia Caldwell had undergone extensive counseling and had eventually made the difficult but necessary decision to voluntarily terminate her parental rights, acknowledging that she was not equipped to provide the stable, safe environment her children needed. It was a heartbreaking choice, but one that demonstrated her love for Jake and Emma in a way that her previous inability to protect them had not. The Henderson family had formally applied to adopt both children, and the process was nearing completion. David and Linda had provided the consistent, nurturing environment that allowed Jake and Emma to begin healing from their trauma while building new foundations of trust and security. More importantly, they understood that healing from abuse was not a linear process, and they had been patient and supportive through the inevitable setbacks and challenging moments. "Mrs. Martinez," Jake said as the bus pulled away from their stop, "I wanted to thank you again for what you did. My therapist says it's important to express gratitude to the people who help us, and you saved our lives." Gloria adjusted her rearview mirror so she could see both children clearly. Even after 6 months, hearing Jake acknowledge what had happened still brought tears to her eyes. "Jake, sweetheart, I've told you before that you and Emma are the brave ones. I just happened to be paying attention when you needed someone to notice." Emma leaned forward in her seat. "But Dr. Morrison says that lots of adults don't pay attention the way you did. She says that what makes you special is that you cared enough to do something when you could have just minded your own business." Doctor. Sarah Morrison was the child psychologist who had been working with both children since their placement with the Hendersons. She had helped them process their trauma while teaching them healthy coping strategies and rebuilding their ability to trust adult caregivers. The progress both children had made under her guidance was remarkable, though she had been careful to manage everyone's expectations about the long-term nature of recovery from childhood abuse. As the bus continued its route, picking up other children who chatted excitedly about upcoming tests, weekend plans, and the mundane concerns of young people who had never had to worry about their basic safety, Gloria reflected on how the events of that October morning had changed not just the Caldwell children's lives, but her own as well. She had been invited to speak at several conferences for school transportation professionals about recognizing signs of child abuse and the importance of trusting professional instincts. Her story had inspired other bus drivers to be more vigilant and had led to additional training programs throughout the district. Most importantly, she had learned that sometimes the most profound acts of heroism was simply a matter of paying attention and caring enough to act on what you observed. The Jefferson Elementary School came into view, its familiar brick facade now holding entirely different associations for the Caldwell children. Instead of a place where they had struggled to hide their secrets and fear, it had become a sanctuary where teachers and staff understood their needs and supported their continued healing. Mrs. Peterson had worked closely with Dr. Morrison to create classroom strategies that helped both children feel safe and supported. Emma's desk had been moved to a location where she could easily see the door and didn't feel trapped, while Jake had been given leadership opportunities that allowed him to channel his protective instincts in positive ways rather than feeling solely responsible for his sister's welfare. As the children filed off the bus, Emma turned back to wave at Gloria with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a little girl who knew she would see her trusted adult again that afternoon. Jake followed his sister toward the school entrance, but he paused to give Gloria a thumbs up and a smile that spoke to the confidence he had rebuilt over the past 6 months. Principal Williams appeared in the doorway of the school, as he often did during morning arrival time. He caught Gloria's eye and nodded with the respect and gratitude that had characterized their interactions since that terrible October day when she had first reported her concerns. The entire school community had rallied around the Caldwell children, creating a network of support that extended far beyond the Henderson family. As Gloria closed the bus door and prepared to continue her route, she noticed Detective Chen's unmarked police car parked in the visitor's lot. The detective still checked on Jake and Emma periodically, not because there were ongoing safety concerns, but because she had become genuinely invested in their continued well-being. Her role in their rescue had forged bonds that extended beyond professional duty. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the school playground where children were already gathering for the start of another day. For Jake and Emma Caldwell, it was a day filled with the ordinary possibilities that every child deserved, learning new things, playing with friends, and looking forward to returning to a home where they were loved, protected, and cherished. Gloria smiled as she pulled away from Jefferson Elementary, knowing that in a few hours she would see those two resilient children again, ready to take them home to the safety and love they had finally found. It was a routine that never got old, a daily reminder that sometimes trusting your instincts and caring enough to act could literally change the course of young lives forever. 1 year after that pivotal October morning, Gloria Martinez stood in the gymnasium of Jefferson Elementary School, wearing her best dress and feeling more nervous than she had in decades. The annual school district recognition ceremony was underway, and she had been informed that she would be receiving a special award, though the specifics had been kept secret from her. Scanning the crowded room, she spotted familiar faces throughout the audience. Principal Williams, Mrs. Peterson, Detective Chen, Dr. Morrison, and most importantly David and Linda Henderson, sitting in the front row with Jake and Emma. The children had grown significantly over the past year. Jake, now 12 and in 7th grade, had shot up several inches and carried himself with the confident posture of a young man who knew his worth and felt secure in his place in the world. Emma, 9 years old and thriving in 4th grade, radiated the kind of joy that comes from knowing you are unconditionally loved and protected. Both children wore their best clothes and had expressions of barely contained excitement as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Superintendent Dr. Karen Walsh took the podium and began speaking about the importance of community vigilance in protecting children. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to recognize individuals who have gone above and beyond their professional duties to ensure the safety and well-being of our students. Sometimes heroism comes in grand gestures, but more often it manifests in the everyday courage of adults who choose to pay attention, to care and to act when children need them most. As Dr. Walsh continued her remarks, Gloria's mind drifted back over the events of the past year. The legal proceedings had been difficult, but ultimately successful, with Mike Richardson receiving a sentence that ensured he would never again have the opportunity to harm children. Patricia Caldwell had completed a residential treatment program and had begun rebuilding her life, though she maintained only supervised contact with Jake and Emma, as they all continued to heal from the trauma they had shared. The Henderson family's adoption of both children had been finalized 3 months earlier, in a courtroom ceremony that had been attended by many of the same people who were present today. Judge Barbara Chen, no relation to Detective Chen, had spoken eloquently about the courage it took for adults to open their hearts and homes to children who had experienced trauma, and about the resilience of young people who could learn to trust and love again, despite having been betrayed by those who should have protected them. Gloria Martinez, Dr. Walsh announced, bringing Gloria's attention back to the present moment. Please join me on stage. As Gloria made her way to the front of the gymnasium, she was surprised to see Jake and Emma stand up and begin walking toward the stage as well. The children had been part of the planning for this ceremony, and they had specifically requested to be part of the presentation. Mrs. Martinez, Dr. Walsh continued as Gloria reached the podium, your actions on October 15th of last year exemplify everything we hope to see from the adults who work with our children. Your willingness to trust your instincts, to speak up for children who couldn't speak for themselves, and to persist even when doing so was uncomfortable, saved 2 young lives and demonstrated the kind of community vigilance that protects all of our students. Jake stepped forward with a large framed certificate, while Emma carried a bouquet of flowers that she had helped Linda Henderson arrange that morning. Both children beamed as they stood beside Gloria, representing not just their own recovery and growth, but the positive outcomes that were possible when caring adults chose to act on behalf of vulnerable children. But the real recognition today, Dr. Walsh said, comes from the young people whose lives you changed. Jake and Emma asked to be part of this ceremony because they wanted to share how your actions affected them. Jake took the microphone with the poise of a young man who had learned to use his voice to advocate for himself and others. Mrs. Martinez, a year ago, my sister and I were living in fear every single day. We thought that was just how life was supposed to be, and we had convinced ourselves that if we just tried harder to be perfect, maybe the bad things would stop happening. His voice was clear and strong, without the tremor that had characterized his speech in the early months after his rescue. When you noticed that something was wrong that morning and decided to do something about it, you didn't just save us from being hurt that day. You saved us from a life where we thought we didn't deserve to be safe and happy. Emma stepped forward to add her own words, her 9-year-old voice carrying a wisdom that came from having experienced both the worst and best that life could offer. Mrs. Martinez, you taught us that there are good grown-ups in the world who will protect kids and keep them safe. Because of you, we learned that we're worth saving and that we deserve to have adults who love us and take care of us. The gymnasium fell silent, except for the sound of tissues being pulled from purses as many audience members wiped away tears. Gloria herself was struggling to maintain her composure as she accepted the certificate and flowers from the 2 children who had come to mean so much to her. Jake and Emma, she finally managed to say, her voice thick with emotion, you two are the real heroes in this story. You survived something terrible, and then you had the courage to heal and grow and become the amazing young people you are today. I'm honored that I could play a small part in helping you find your way to safety. Detective Chen stood up from her seat in the audience and began applauding, followed quickly by everyone else in the gymnasium. The standing ovation continued for several minutes, but Gloria's attention was focused entirely on the 2 children standing beside her, both of whom had wrapped their arms around her waist in a spontaneous group hug. As the ceremony concluded and people began to mingle and congratulate Gloria, she found herself surrounded by the network of professionals who had worked together to ensure Jake and Emma's safety and recovery. Dr. Morrison spoke about the remarkable progress both children had made in therapy, while Principal Williams discussed their academic achievements and social growth at school. But the most meaningful conversation came when Linda and David Henderson approached with expressions of gratitude that went beyond words. Gloria, Linda said, we can never adequately thank you for bringing Jake and Emma into our lives. They have enriched our family in ways we never could have imagined, and watching them heal and grow has been the greatest privilege of our lives. David nodded in agreement. These children have taught us so much about resilience and the power of love to overcome trauma. But none of it would have been possible without your courage to act on what you observed that morning. As the evening wound down and families began to head home, Gloria walked out to the parking lot with the Hendersons and the children. The October air was crisp and clear, reminiscent of that morning exactly 1 year earlier when her instincts had first told her that something was wrong. But tonight, instead of fear and uncertainty, the air was filled with hope and the promise of continued healing and growth. Mrs. Martinez, Emma said as they reached Gloria's car, will you come to our house for dinner this weekend? Linda is making her famous lasagna, and Jake and I want to show you the treehouse that David helped us build in the backyard. Gloria smiled, thinking about how far they had all come in just 1 year. I would love that, sweetheart. I'll bring dessert." As she drove home through the familiar streets of Cedar Falls, Gloria reflected on the lesson she had learned about the power of trusting your instincts and the responsibility that came with caring for other people's children. She had been driving school buses for 18 years now, and she knew that she would continue to watch over her young passengers with the same vigilance and care that had saved Jake and Emma's lives. The radio in her bus crackled to life with the familiar evening dispatch messages, reminding her that tomorrow would bring another day of watching over children, ensuring their safety, and trusting her instincts to protect those who couldn't always protect themselves. It was a responsibility she had never taken lightly, but now she understood more fully than ever how critical her role truly was in the lives of the children she served. That night, as Gloria placed Jake's drawing on her refrigerator next to the certificate she had received at the ceremony, she said a quiet prayer of gratitude for the instincts that had prompted her to act, for the courage that had allowed her to speak up, and for the remarkable resilience of two children who had transformed a story of abuse and fear into one of healing, hope, and love. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If you enjoyed this story and appreciate this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss upcoming videos and more fascinating stories. Until next time.